lunch and is seated and ready to dive into our next session, feel free to enjoy your meal while we get started. Up next is our Lunch and Learn, focused on one of the most critical aspects of running a successful business, managing cash flow. I'm excited to welcome Michael Cheatham, Vice President of External Affairs at Comerica Bank. Michael is a passionate advocate for small business growth with deep expertise in financial strategy and community engagement. Today, he'll be sharing practical tools, insights to help you strengthen your financial foundation and prepare you for sustainable growth. Let's give a warm welcome to Michael Cheatham.
Well, thank you. I wish I knew the guy you would introduce. I don't know him. I like him better. Also, I'm sorry you had to look at my face while you were eating your lunch, but hopefully I'll offset that with today's conversation. And I'm using the word conversation on purpose because this will be about a give and take, a back and forth versus a lecture. You know, especially while you're eating. I know the items will kick in, and then y'all be sleepy and all of that. So I'd rather have you, as we're talking, feel free to ask questions, ask me to clarify things. This stuff is generally boring. I understand that. I accept that. So I'll do what I can to keep you engaged outside of the content. I'll put it this way. It's not boring to get cash flow, but it's boring to hear about it. Sometimes. A little bit more about myself. So this is my 31st year with Comerica. Most of that time has actually been spent in the banking center system. So I've been managing branches all around Metro Detroit. So I have a lot of experience with entrepreneurs and small business owners. But currently my job is, at the very least, to go out into the community and share what we consider to be valuable information with the people that need it most. Because we recognize that people don't just wake up in the morning like, I want to go talk to some boring person at the bank and tell them all my business, right? And so we recognize that we need to get out into the community to share this information. I also take a moment to clap for yourself. And I appreciate that you clapped before you even knew I was having you clap. But no, I want you to clap for yourselves because kudos to you for taking time out to invest in your business. I know oftentimes business owners spend so much time running their business that their business winds up running them. And so it is good and great that you all took time out to learn more about how to be more successful in the business that you have. I have a saying, I don't think I recognize too many faces in here, so you all are hearing this first time. Just because you know how to bake a cake does not mean you know how to run a bakery. And that's not slight to anybody, that's just facts. They're different skill sets. And so for you to take time to come from behind the batter, behind the mixer, to come out and learn how to run the bakery, again, is commendable. So I thank you for sharing some of your time with me today. So we're going to talk about cash flow, right? And so one of the funny things about cash flow for my generation, my mother used to always say, well, if I owe you money, you'll never be broke, right? Well, in business, we know that ain't true. We know many businesses that have huge contracts, huge receivables, but that doesn't pay payroll, right? As a banking center manager, oftentimes I've had business owners call me, hey Mike, I'm gonna be a little short today, I'll get there by 1 o'clock. I got some people coming in to cash their checks, right? I've dealt with employees. My boss didn't have money in the account, right? And that's not, again, none of this is a slight. This is just real world examples of how cash flow can really affect your business, right? Let alone issues with vendors and other people that you need to pay. So that's why this is such an important component of managing your business, right? I will also say as a disclaimer and as an aside and as a sales pitch, the conversation or the phone call that I got from those business owners was only possible because they had a relationship with me. They had a relationship with me. So for those of you that do not currently have a relationship with your banker, when you leave here, you need to establish one. Now, I think you all, because you're here at this type of conference, you all have moved past the understanding that you need to separate your business and personal accounts. You're all good on that, right? Okay, but, so, As a business owner, you need to have trusted advisors. And one of those trusted advisors should be a banker, because these things will happen. You all have been running businesses for a week at least, and you know things come up, right? So hiccups with payroll and all these types of things, and you need somebody who can advocate with you inside of your financial institution. So if you don't take anything else away from what we talked about today, establish a relationship with your banker. And I don't mean with a teller, nothing wrong with tellers, I will tell her. Somebody who can advocate for you and make things happen on your behalf inside the financial institution. And I won't bore you with all the different examples of where that's helped businesses, but just think about that as you are reminiscing on today's conversation. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what the purpose is of cash flow, how to assess cash flow, and describe how a cash flow statement can help you. And they say assess and improve your financial health as a startup. You will need to understand cash flow as long as you run a business. And something else that I can tell you in my 30 plus years with the bank, all of the stuff we're going to talk about for your business is stuff that applies to your personal life. All of the things that we're going to talk about today apply to your personal life. So if you're not doing this stuff at home, go home and do this stuff too, okay? Because all of the same issues that you run into as a business owner because of cash flow, you'll run into on the personal side as well. And maybe you don't identify it as a cash flow issue even, but believe me, these things are very applicable on both sides. Next slide. We're going to talk about some ways to manage cash flow, right? And we're going to talk about seeking expert advice, right? The trusted advisor, right? Next slide. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this. This is basically a case study. And so this is about the Wired Cup. And this guy named Bob, and he owns a coffee shop on a college campus. And he's just gotten started, and basically he's... I don't know if that was it. They got a deeper question. All right, so he got a $30,000, he put in $30,000 of his own money. He got a $20,000 loan, and then, so he spent a total of $45,000 on startup costs. So now he has $5,000 in his bank account. So this is the cash flow we're talking about. He's got $5,000 in his bank account. He's very popular on campus. Students know him, but his concern is, what does he do during the holidays? What does he do during the summer when school is out? Because, he's relying on business from the professors and from the students. And, he wants to figure out, well, what do I do during the slow times? Because many of you run cyclical businesses, right? If you're a landscaping company, right, when the leaves stop falling, unless you have a snowplow, you're not doing much work, right? If you're a construction company, once it starts, snowing, you're probably not doing much work. So these are some things that, while we're talking about a bakery here or a coffee shop, again, many of these things are applicable to your business. Okay, and the biggest problem is his $5,000 that he started with is almost gone, right? So he's got $5,000, he started with $5,000 in the cash register, and now it's almost gone. Oh, real quick. So a couple of the questions that he's worried about is, how will he pay his bills if there are fewer customers? Will he have enough money to ramp up again in September, right? Because we also know that as you're preparing for all of these customers, and here we're talking about contract, right? You recognize that when you get a big contract, you might need to hire some more folks. You might need to buy some more equipment, right? You might need to get some additional insurance. All of these things are expenses that maybe you hadn't thought about. Should he buy in bulk to reduce costs? And then also, will suppliers allow him to buy on credit, right? Because again, a lot of the things that we do, we may not necessarily have the cash in our pockets to do, but we still need to make it happen. Next slide. So he's off to a good start. He's got a solid business model and all of that, but he has some issues. And this is the most important line here at the bottom. The good news is that Bob is thinking ahead. He is thinking ahead. We all know in life, in business, emergencies happen, right? But emergencies sting a whole lot less if you have a plan before you reach that emergency than running around trying to figure things out on the fly. There is a saying in banking, The best time to ask for a loan is when you don't need the money, right? The best time to ask for a loan is when you don't need the money. And the idea there is, when you're in a crisis, you're not necessarily thinking as clearly. If it's a crisis with your business, your financials may not be as strong, and you might be juggling other things, so you may not even have the time that it takes to put forth the real effort that it takes to solve your problem when you're in crisis. So, the idea, one of the big ideas with cash flow is it allows you to plan ahead so that you can see things coming and start putting a plan in place before it becomes a problem. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a balance sheet. Some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not be, but a balance sheet is a moment in time picture of how your company is positioned financially. It's a snapshot. You can technically do a new balance sheet every day. Most businesses do them monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, but it's a snapshot. And the thing that's most important on this one is the asset side at the top, because most balance sheets start with what we call your cash position. This again is how much money you have in your bank account or have easy access to. Now there's some other things on here. Now this particular balance sheet is a little different than what you might normally see, and I know I recognize you can't necessarily see all of this, but this balance sheet, what they did on this one is they listed all of the costs, all of the things that he bought to open the door as an asset. They gave that a value and put that on the asset side. So, long story short, his total current assets are $15,500, and then he's got some fixed assets, sometimes they're called long-term assets, which is kitchen equipment, leasehold improvements. Who here knows what a leasehold improvement is? Okay, it's a fancy word, and remember I told you this is stuff that you probably heard before, but maybe the jargon is different. A leasehold improvement is something that gets many early stage entrepreneurs in trouble. It gets many early stage entrepreneurs in trouble. So a leasehold improvement, or leasehold improvements, are improvements that you make to a space that you do not own. That's the word lease. So we'll use his business as an example. What we call a vanilla box. Basically, a front door, a back door, potentially a bathroom, some lights, and some sort of light-colored paint, like what you see in here, a vanilla box. So he has to turn that into a coffee shop. And in order to do that, he's going to need to repaint, he's going to need to buy tables and chairs, he's going to need to bring in a display case and an oven and all of the other things that he needs. But remember, he does not own the space. And so the reason that I brought this up for early stage entrepreneurs is because many entrepreneurs that I know, this is my experience, their Mount Rushmore, not their Mount Rushmore, their peak of existence for many is to open a storefront. And so unfortunately, many of them make that move prematurely. And the problem with leasehold improvements is it costs a lot, and it's money that you may not get back. I mean, you definitely can't take the paint off the walls, right? Let alone all of the other things. And here's the kind of even more sinister part. A lot of that stuff you leave, and who benefits from that? The person that leaves you the space, right? So these are just things you want to think about. So again, I recognize that, this is not to, pour water on anybody's dream, and I recognize that storefront is an important aspect or something to aspire to, but be careful. Because many people have opened up a beautiful space, and then they have to close months later because they have not been able to generate the revenue necessary to stay open, to pay all of these bills that they've created when they change their vanilla box into their specialized space. Let alone inventory, right? Once you have space, you gotta have stuff, right? And you spend a lot of money on inventory up front, and if you can't flip that inventory, you're not gonna be in business. So investors are harder because unlike a lender, there's no guarantee, there's no legal obligation for you to pay investors back. So, as many of you are familiar with pitch competition, a shameless plug, America has a Hatch Detroit competition. You can look that up. But that's part of your pitch, right? You need to be able to meet somebody and explain to them why your business is worth investing in. And one of the key components of that, as another aside, is when people are resistant to putting their own money in their business. So, forget I have on this suit, forget I have a title, let's pretend we're friends on the street. If you don't trust your business, why should I? If you're not willing to put your own money into the business, why should I invest in it? Why should I give you a loan? So keep that in mind as you are along this entrepreneurial journey. Okay, so you got your water coming in through sales, debt, again, loans, and equity, which is investors. Each of these pipes travels to a place that holds water, a place that may hold your cash. Each of these faucets represent an opportunity for you to increase or decrease the flow of that water through this system. It's an opportunity and an area where you can increase or decrease the flow of the water through this system. So let's just go to the very first one, right? You have sales. Money went into sales. There's a section here called accounts receivable. Fancy way of saying you have delivered a product or service to someone, but they have yet to pay you. That is an account receivable. On your balance sheet, that is an asset. Somebody owes you money, right? The reason that there is a faucet here is because you can control how much of your sales are are created as accounts receivables or not. Now, the easiest way is to turn it off and don't offer credit, right? For example, restaurants don't offer credit. Right? You can't go in and buy a hamburger and be like, I'll pay you on Tuesday. Wimpy tried to get us like that. Wimpy tried to get, I'm sorry, some people in here are not age experienced enough to know who Wimpy is, so I will move on. But anyway, so you can control your accounts receivable, right? You can also control how aggressively you go after those accounts receivable to convert them to cash. Right? You have some people say, I'll just call them after 30 days. Some people call every week. And there's stuff in between, right? So you can control that. And that's where this faucet here and these raindrops, or these water droplets, this is money leaving your business. Every time you see a water droplet, that is money leaving your business. That's cash leaving your business. And so one of the ways that cash leaves your business is bad credit. You sold a product or service, created an account receivable, and the people aren't paying you. And again, there's a faucet there because you can determine how you deal with your bad credit. Maybe that's a reason that you stop offering credit in the first place. Maybe you become more aggressive in your collections, right? All of these things. Maybe you adjust your terms. Maybe you increase or decrease interest rates. All of these types of things. But that's why that faucet is there. But accounts receivable are an asset that you can control. So you have purchased a product or service, but they're going to let you pay for it later. That ultimately affects your available cash because even though you haven't paid for it today, you need to account for it as if it has already been spent. And let's go back to again, let's talk about our personal accounts. You know your car note is due. You know your mortgage is due, right? Don't let, somebody said, you look like a preacher. So, but yes, so you need to account for that money as if it's gone. So when you look at your bank account, business or personal, and you have $100 in there, no, you don't have $100 in there because you know in a week or two, I got to pay for this, and this, and you need to make accounting for that. So that's why that is there to reduce your available cash. Even though the money is sitting in the account, it ain't all yours. Okay? Now, let's go to, remember we talked about water droplets, right? I'll start from the bottom. This is general money leaving the business. There's just going to be stuff that happens in your business that are going to cost you money, right? These are these expenses, right? Then you have administration, right? You got to pay HR and legal and your Wi-Fi, all of this stuff, right? All of the things that it takes to run the business, and also utilities and things like that. Insurance. All of that is money leaving your business. Then selling, we talked about marketing, right? And again, you notice how all of these have a faucet because you can adjust these things, right? You can adjust these things, but these are all things leaving your business. Now, there's a big one up here, ECFPO. ECFPO. I will give somebody $20 if they could tell me what that means. ECFPO. Yes.
Paying yourself.
Okay. I I give you $10. Listen, that's close. That is close. That is close. But I should have been, that's my fault. I work in banking, I should be more detailed. You see what it means is excess cash, right, from profitable operations. Excess cash from profitable operations. Now the reason that we say that, excess cash from profitable operations, is because in a perfect world, I won't say in the real world, but in a perfect world, you shouldn't be taking any money out of your business until your stuff is paid. You should not be taking any money out of your business until your stuff is paid. That's why many, and I'm sure we have some experienced entrepreneurs in here, you may not get your first paycheck for 2 or 3 years. You may not be able to take your first earnings draw for 6 months. Or the owner's draw, not earnings draw, owner's draw. Because that's excess cash from profitable operations, right? And you notice the drops are much smaller there than they are for these others. They use a shower head that it's sprinkled on a little bit, right? So, after the money gets into the actual bank account from all of this stuff, then you have other money leaving the bank, leaving the account. So payroll taxes, sales taxes, and debt. Because remember, one of the expenses related to debt is what? Interest. Interest, absolutely, interest. So that's money leaving, that's just servicing the debt, that's not giving you any additional money, it's not generating any additional revenue, not bringing you any new customers, that's just an expense, that's money leaving the business. And then finally, as you get lower, you have things like income tax, and we talked about leasing, right? So you have a choice. You can buy fixed assets, or you can lease them. And depending on your business, there's benefits to both. But those are all things you need to factor into your cash situation. And then finally, there's depreciation. I'm not going to bore you with all of that. So, word for entrepreneurs, break even. Break even. And you won't know what your break even point is unless you do this. And the advantage to this is you can see stuff coming. So, I'll explain it really quickly and then I'll wrap up. At the very, no, go back to the, sorry. So, the cash flow statement. Yeah. Okay. So, here at the bottom, every month you have something called your cash balance or your available cash, how much you have. And what you want to look for as you do this type of work is negative numbers. You want to look for negative numbers. At some point in the future, if you forecast correctly, you may notice that you have a negative number. Now, in Bob's case, Bob didn't hit his first negative number until almost a year later, but he has 12 months now to plan for it, right? You don't want to have that the day that you open the door and realize, oh shoot, I can't make payroll, or I can't pay my taxes, or whatever, and this will help you avoid that. So if you do not currently have a cash flow statement, and more importantly, if you do not understand how it was developed, you should talk to somebody. You should have a cash flow statement going out at least a year for your business. So if you do not already have the skill set to do that, or don't have somebody that's doing that for you, please take some time to do that. Because again, in my time in banking, this is what trips most businesses up. And we all know the IRS will close you sooner than anything, faster than any other thing that you can have happen in your business. Because many business owners, they're busy paying their payroll, which is great. You want to take care of your people. They're keeping the lights on, which is great. But if you don't pay those taxes, you're going to have a problem. Let alone issues with vendors, right? You're bumping along well, and then Mike's Bakery all of a sudden can't go buy flour or sugar because I haven't been paying my vendors. That will put me out of business. So again, that's why this is such an important competency for all small business owners. Understand your cash flow statement.